I think we have seen a, how do I want to say, a normalization, a normalization of kinky stuff as being part of sex, at least as part of the conversation in the past couple of decades. And I'm sure that that's, you can trace that back going further and further. I've heard that, in the 60s, a blowjob was like the height of kink. And now it's sort of almost like the base entry level. But as stuff has become more and more normalized, I'll get a little bit personal here. As somebody who identifies as pretty non-kinky and vanilla, I've heard that people have experienced almost a backlash of vanilla shame, like something's wrong with me if I'm not kinky. And Matthew, that sort of speaks to, I think, what you were talking about, that that it is a spectrum, that a lot of people treat sex as either you do it this way and it's good, or you do it this way and you're no good. So I'm curious if any of you have experienced that kind of spectrum of people dealing with that over seeing kink become more normalized.
I've heard that from clients and in classes. I've had clients in my office basically apologize to me, like, sorry, I'm not poly, or sorry, I'm not kinky, as though I am like personally invested in what kind of sex they're going to have. I've had it come up in college classes when I'm doing Kink 101 that people think vanilla is like a derogatory term now. And I've started prefacing classes now with that discussion. I just taught Kink 101 for Shebop online and sort of prefaced saying I don't think it's about being better or worse. I think it's important that everybody has all the options. They know all of the relationship structures they could have. They know that there are different kinds of sex available, and then they should choose whatever the heck they want. And as long as they're enjoying it, the other people involved are enjoying it, that's great. But yeah, I do think we're sort of seeing that reversal, as though there's something wrong with you if you're not doing all of the things.
That's super fascinating to me. And I'm glad that that's coming up more and more in classes, because I felt like for people who are feeling that way, there's it feels like there's a limited way of telling a person it's okay if you're vanilla, or it's okay if you're not kinky or you're not poly, without sounding condescending, without, so it's awesome that you're able to do that in a way that really communicates compassion and spectrum, and that everybody's sex positivity is their own, or I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note too that people are multifaceted. I know, Stella, I've taken a number of your classes, and I think I've heard you say a number of times, I have vanilla sex all the time. What? Because like, that's the thing, right? Like sometimes you don't have to identify as kinky, as vanilla, as polyamorous, as non-monogamous. Like the labeling, I know it helps to have labels to help talk about things. But I think we all think that we sexually have to have a label too, as part of, I see Lola shaking your head. Do you have some feelings?
I get more of I feel like there's a lot of people, I get the violent side maybe. Maybe violent's a harsh word, but I have a lot of people that get very angry that I'm talking about polyamory. I had somebody yell at me at a live show because I had a guest on I had Kevin Patterson, poly person, and we were talking about polyamory, and she stood up and was like, well, why aren't you talking about monogamy? And I'm like, because you do monogamy every day, all day. Everybody talks about monogamy. Tissue commercials talk about monogamy. Today, you don't get to hear about monogamy. Sit down or you can leave. And she was like angry that I wouldn't baby her. And I'm like, I'm not coddling you, because you shouldn't have to be told you count, because the world tells you that you count. And people like kinky folk and poly folk are finally getting to a place where we see ourselves on TV. We're seeing ourselves in books that are sold at mainstream bookstores, like even if they're written in a very shitty way. We're seeing like ourselves, and like, because people who are vanilla and monogamous a lot of times have such a disconnect from their sexuality, they don't realize how much the world actually revolves around them. There are no Hallmark movies with polyamorous people in them. It is aggressively monogamous. And every Christmas, we get aggressive monogamy. You should give up your job in the city and fall in love with that boy on the farm who you were in love with when you were 12 and you didn't know you wanted to be with him, and your grandma is sick and she's leaving her your farm, and you're going to give up your life to be with this boy, and you're going to get married even though you only kissed one time. That's how aggressive monogamy is. But people want you to like still coddle them. And it's like, I refuse. You know, like when we're getting equal airtime, maybe, but maybe connect with your sexuality a little bit more, and you would look around and go, oh yeah, you're always talking about my stuff. I mean, like even Cosmo, I never thought those things were kinky. It was just how to make, it was like spicy. It was like vanilla with a little cinnamon in it. It was never, there was nothing like, even in high school, I was like, this is not kinky. Some of this is dangerous, but it's not kinky. It's not kinky. And so I think I just want people to realize it's like, you're not wrong because you're everywhere. And if you were wrong, you wouldn't be anywhere. Like that's the message we're getting, is that we're wrong. So we don't get to be anywhere. Like we have to really push to be seen and to be part of the mainstream. And it's like, we can all coexist, but there's going to be some times where you feel like things are a little bit more, people are talking about more because it's exciting, right? Like even if you're not kinky, so many housewives read 50 Shades of Grey and then didn't do anything. You know, like there's nobody painted a room red. Nobody went and bought them love balls. But it was just a spicy moment where you're like, oh, there's things in the world that exist that I'm just not going to do, but they're there.
Yeah.
Something I would say is, another word for shame is normal. Anytime you hear the word normal, think shame, because that's actually what I would argue that word means. And what I mean by that is there is no such thing as normal sex. There is no such thing. What we think is normal would be absurd in other cultures. In fact, what Dirty Lola was talking about, more times than not, when someone says normal, what they mean is normative. Because, for example, the most normal, statistically speaking, the most average experience is polygyny. The first 5 books of the Bible, all polygynous families. Every culture has practiced polygyny. It is practiced historically. So if we're going to use the word normal as the most common human experience around ways to create connection and family, that would be the most normal. But I always like to think the word normal is a sneaky hidden way of saying shame.
Mm-hmm.